What's quaking, people? Character Quake here, coming at you with my reaction to Sabaton History 43. This is about the song Reign of Terror, and this is about the Operation Desert Storm. Guys, if you want me to react to something on YouTube, it's $10 per 10 minutes. If you want me to react to something but you don't quite want to pay $10, you can come down to one of my Twitch live streams. It's only $3 per 10 minutes for a reaction there. Links for donations are down in the description. Also down there in the description is a link to my merch store and my throne. There are a lot of ways to support the channel if you can. If you can't, likes, comments, and subscriptions help immensely. Also, guys, down there is a link to my Wattpad page. I'm writing a book. It's called Gales of Fire. It's anime inspired. Every time I release a chapter, it goes up on Wattpad. There's about 12 chapters up there now. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Alright, guys, I'm really excited about this. I can't wait to get into this. This is Reign of Terror, Operation Desert Storm, Sabaton History, number 43.
Operation Desert Storm was one of the largest international land battles fought since the Second World War.
And our song Reign of Terror is about that battle.
Oh, yeah.
Between 1980 and 1988, the war between Iran and Iraq raged in the Persian Gulf. And it was a terrible, merciless war, with poison gas used against civilians and child soldiers fighting and dying by the thousands. The U.S. and many Western nations, among other states in the world, had chosen to support the Iraqi military with money and weaponry, as it seemed that Saddam Hussein, the Ba'ath Party dictator of Iraq, was a preferable ally against the spreading influence of Islamic fundamentalist revolution of the Iranian mullahs. However, the Iran-Iraq war ended in a draw and did not resolve any questions about hegemony in the region. What Iraq was left with was an enormous amount of foreign debt. Its reserves were depleted, the inflation rate was increasing, and the Iraqi financial situation deteriorated to the point where an economic collapse seemed to be just around the corner.
Ooh.
A major problem was Iraq's rather monolithic economic structure, meaning that it was fully dependent upon its oil output. So, because inter-Arabian rivalry...
Yeah, that's quite an issue, because you take that out and it cripples them. It's one of those things where I've heard a lot of people in my lifetime complain about how much oil we have reserved here that we're not using. Like, we have gas prices are extremely high here because we're still relying on OPEC, when we have our own oil reserves. We have like the largest oil reserves in the world, I'm pretty sure. By here, I mean the United States. I'm from the United States. And the thing that I think this is the reason. This may not be the only reason. I'm not a political strategist or anything, or a military strategist, but I'm pretty sure that the issue is, if something ever happens where, like, say there's a huge world war, or for some reason we cannot rely on OPEC, or we would choose not to rely on OPEC anymore, we can rely on our own reserves for a long time. A long time. So we are currently not dependent on our own oil output. We just have it on the back burner. And I think that's kind of a benefit that we have, see that as you will, as a citizen here, struggling with all the high gas prices or whatever you want to see it as. But yeah, that's very interesting.
And Saddam's notoriety in the region prevented Iraq from cooperating with others in the region. The only solution seemed to be to sell more oil. Thing is, though, what Iraq was also left with was a relatively modern and well-equipped army. Saddam could call upon a total army of 1 million active troops, of whom the experienced and battle-hardened Republican Guard was the most dangerous, and another 850,000 reserves. With 750 fighter jets, Iraq also had the 6th strongest air force in the world at the time. Thousands of tanks and artillery pieces, and officers trained after Soviet and British models made the army a serious threat to its neighbors. One such neighbor was little Kuwait to the south. Kuwait was already a thorn in Hussein's side, as its overproduction of oil helped flood the market and lower prices, to which the Iraqi dictator responded with a series of pressure and threats. But after these failed, Saddam Hussein gave the order for invasion. On August 2nd, 1990, 7 Iraqi divisions crossed the border into Kuwait, overrunning any resistance and securing Kuwait City and the Kuwaiti oil fields.
Now, obviously, invading a country and taking them over, yada, 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 that's a terrible thing. But when you consider the fact that Iraq's sole economic structure was based on their oil output, and that Kuwait's activities were hindering the profits they can get from that, and basically hindering the revenue of the nation itself. I mean, it's in that regard, call it devil's advocate if you will, but that's it's understandable they would want that to stop, because you drive those prices down enough, Iraq's not going to be able to sustain itself off of their output anymore. Now, is that justification to invade them? I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just saying it's understandable that they would want that kind of thing to stop.
In just 9 hours, Saddam Hussein had presented the international community a fait accompli. Seemingly overnight, all of Iraq's problems were gone. By annexing Kuwait, it would not only pay off its debt to foreign creditors with Kuwaiti money, but would also control 20% of the world's oil deposits. While the rest of the world was stunned by Hussein's unpredictability, Iraqi forces marched to the border with Saudi Arabia. Now confronted with the possibility that Iraq might continue its offensive and incorporate the Saudi oil fields and strategic airports as well, the whole international community got together to act. Saddam's attack against the integrity and the sovereignty of the Kuwaiti state did not only bring about a Western anti-Iraq coalition, it also agitated fellow Arabian countries as well, and even the Soviet Union, busy at the time with what would turn out to be its dissolution, approved of intervention. While the U.S. bolstered the defenses of their partners in the region, the UN Security Council made it clear that Saddam's invasion would
I've been there, by the way. The United Nations, I've been there. It's huge, it's pretty crazy, but yeah, I have been there. It's really cool.
Have direct consequences. Already that month, UN resolutions went into effect. And on November 9th, American President George Bush ordered 200,000 troops to the Gulf, a number that would increase to 540,000. Phase 1 had already begun, Operation Desert Shield. By building a...
I'm also pretty sure that my uncle was in this war as well. He was deployed. I think he was military police, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm pretty sure he was in this war.
A defensive belt at the Saudi Arabian border with Patriot missiles and long-range artillery, the coalition forces from 34 nations could deter any Iraqi attack while still reinforcing and building up. Phase 2 would be Operation Desert Storm. Since Saddam Hussein refused to withdraw his forces voluntarily, he would have to be removed from Kuwait by force. The operation would first achieve air superiority and then systematically destroy Iraqi offensive capabilities, especially from the feared Scud missiles with their potential of launching biological and chemical weapons. On the night of January 16th and 17th, 1991, Desert Shield turned to Desert Storm.
I was a year old when that happened.
Massive coalition aircraft attacks from the airfields in Saudi Arabia and a barrage of 220 cruise missiles destroyed the Iraqi early warning systems and anti-aircraft batteries. Modern coalition jets with computerized target systems obliterated the inferior Iraqi Air Force and most of its airfields and communication systems. On January 25th, though, Saddam Hussein retaliated by opening the crude oil depository at Nuba Ak Amadi into the Gulf and setting 600 oil production facilities and tankers ablaze.
Oh, wow.
This?
Oh, wow. Talk about an environmental crisis. Oh, man.
Was a new form of ecological warfare with disastrous consequences for the environment.
Right.
But it was actually mostly a political statement. Saddam wanted to hit the West where it hurt the most. On February 17th, the battlefield preparations began. The clearing of mines, the artillery bombardments on Iraqi strongpoints, and the destruction of the last remaining logistical capabilities took 38 days. Now, with most of the Iraqi Air Force and command systems destroyed, the coalition Air Force changed their targets to ground forces. Now, this was a battle the Iraqi soldiers could not hope to counter. At its end, the Iraqi ground forces were weakened by up to 50%, and as many as 4,000 tanks and armored vehicles, as well as 1,000 heavy artillery pieces, had been destroyed. The intense tactical bombing incapacitated many Iraqi units, while the further strategic bombing from U.S. Navy and Marine Corps aircraft off the coast destroyed Iraqi infrastructure. Now with the enemy weakened to such an extent that only light casualties could be expected, the ground war could finally begin. Way more than half of Iraq's overall strength had been completely wiped out.
Wow.
By feigning a frontal attack between the coast and Minagish, the remaining Iraqi forces were tied down all along the Wadi al-Batin. After artillery punched gaps into the final Iraqi anti-tank barriers, large columns of armored vehicles drove towards the entrenched Iraqi forces on the left flank of the Wadi al-Batin. Leading the way was the 1st U.S. Cavalry Division, supported by attack helicopters, while special ops and paratroopers were dropped behind the lines. The morale of the regular Iraqi forces was by now really low. They'd been abandoned by their leadership in trenches for months. They were constantly short of water. They even resorted to cannibalizing their own tanks and vehicles to make lamps and heating equipment for their bunkers.
Wow.
They often offered little resistance after the first shots and surrendered. Soon, a coalition bridgehead of 15 kilometers was achieved, which would be extended to 70 already by the evening. While the right Iraqi flank was tied down by Syrian, Egyptian, British, and U.S. Marine Corps divisions, a forceful left hook was to punch through the Iraqi lines and then turn to the east and outflank and trap the Iraqi forces. Counterattacks by the remaining tank divisions of the Republican Guard were repulsed with relative ease by superior anti-tank measures of the coalition forces. The outdated T-72 tank was no match for the main American and British battle tanks, like the M1A1 with its better range, fire control, and armor-bursting ammunition. Apache
Wow.
AH-64s with night vision and laser-controlled Maverick or Hellfire missiles, they made short work of hidden or entrenched tanks.
That's the thing. A lot of people criticize the United States, and I'm not saying they're really wrong for this. I'm just saying that a lot of people criticize the United States for having such an aggressive military spending budget. And I'm pretty sure it is higher than like the next 3 of our allies combined or something like that. But here's the deal. When things like this happen, when the U.S. has to respond, and again, has to respond, that's another debate we could have as well. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to talk about the actual facts. You're hard-pressed, no matter who you are in this world, to stand up to the United States military. I mean, they just have the most innovative and modern and advanced technology when it comes to their military force. And when it comes to things like this, where they have to, take people out, or they have to, fight a war for things that hopefully is something that we believe in upholding, it's very hard to take out the American military. And that includes everyone in NATO, all the military allies that we have. So it's crazy.
In short, it wasn't much of a battle, and 4 Iraqi divisions were completely overrun, more than 14,500 prisoners taken. The second day...
That part. That was very Metallica. That was very, very Metallica.
Began with more air attacks against the Iraqi supply lines near the Euphrates, towards Samawa and al-Nasiriyah, while the British and American armored divisions further advanced. The coalition used complex combined arms operations, and by carrying small, lightweight global receivers, High Command knew exactly where their troops were at all times. So the armored left hook continued, while on the right, Marine Corps divisions were further securing key positions in front of Kuwait City. 13 more Iraqi divisions were shattered that day. The third day's advance was accompanied by heavy rain and thick sandstorms. This hampered the advance enough for the still dangerous Republican Guard to act. Now, it was impossible for them to effectively stand up to the coalition forces, not just because of the technology gap, but they were still able to delay the advance with courageous firefights until most of the forces in the east could retreat northwards before they could be encircled. The The 1st Marine Division successfully captured Kuwait City Airport and by the evening cleared the capital of all enemy forces. Large columns of Iraqi prisoners were everywhere. By the 4th day, the main battle was basically over. Mopping up operations took care of the Iraqi troops' final resistance until an armistice at 8 a.m. the following day ended the fight for Kuwait. In just 5 days, the coalition overran 33 Iraqi divisions and cleared all of Kuwait from enemy forces. Although they had failed to effectively encircle and eliminate most of the Republican Guard, who had managed to withdraw along the coast towards Basra, they had destroyed most of the Iraqi heavy equipment and taken more than 69,000 prisoners. The overall aim of destroying Iraq's offensive capabilities had been achieved. After 1,000 hours of war in the air and 100 hours on the ground, the coalition had defeated one of the largest armies on the planet, which you can either see as a masterpiece of organization, planning, and execution, or as a one-sided slaughter where the technological and air warfare capability was nowhere near on the same level. The Iraqi military was never able to go on the initiative or to strike back with reserves. Everything the coalition did was faster, better coordinated, and more destructive. It was the dawn of a new age of technological warfare, where computer and satellite-aided weapons and electronic devices made an enormous difference. Although this was not the end of Saddam Hussein, nor the threat from his regime, the liberation of Kuwait was a prime example of what the United Nations could achieve if they actually agreed on a course of action, even if...
That's a great point. What the United Nations could achieve if they actually agreed on a course of action. Them actually making a unified decision is one of the biggest issues with the United Nations. They're not as useful as their optimistic conception made them seem like they would be. Let's put it that way.
If it was peace through superior firepower. Okay, Reign of Terror. Now it's interesting.
All right. Yeah, so just a little recap on the history part of that. That was crazy. Yeah, I was a baby when this was going on. I'm pretty sure my uncle was a part of this, at least briefly. But man, that's really aggressive. It's really interesting to see to hear, I guess, that was the like turning point of like technological advance. Excuse me. That was like the a new age of technological advancement in warfare, because nowadays we know about like all the drone strikes and computer guided missiles and all that kind of stuff. But I guess back then, the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, it was kind of a new thing, because if the biggest major war before that was what Vietnam probably, and there definitely wasn't as much technological advancement in that war. So yeah, I guess this would be the very first major war that had that kind of advanced modern military approach. That's really interesting. And then, but the thing is, like, that nation Kuwait was devastated by it, and that's kind of what happens when things happen. You got these big regimes are fighting each other, and then the people of the nations are the ones that suffer. It's horrible. But yeah, let's hear about the actual song that came of this.
When we cover songs that are about more recent history, I suppose, for many of us, living memory. So, tell us a little bit about that, about choosing these topics.
It's pretty tricky, actually, because we found that whenever, we're talking about current events, there's a very big risk of bias thanks to media
yeah,
and
of course.
So we try to avoid it these days. I mean, this is back in 2004 or something we recorded this album, and I don't think we would have done it again, or do something that recent, now.
Okay.
Because, I mean, obviously when we did this then and wrote the song, it was about 10 years since it happened.
Right. That's not very long. That's actually kind of interesting. That's not a long time. Like 10 years away. Like what 10 years ago now would be 2012. You know what I mean? What happened in 2012? That's just 10 years ago. So that's the same gap between the album, that song, and the actual event. So it's pretty interesting.
I would say. It's barely enough time. Usually, for us, it feels like it doesn't become interesting or reliable enough until historians have gone through it, until the soldiers have come back and told their stories.
It's often difficult to see its effect.
It's a really good point.
And any war, any battle, until years later, to see it may have some positive or negative effects that you just don't see at the time.
Yeah,
That's a
and
good point, too.
Also, a very important thing to say is to hear both sides of the story, because as something is going on, you are usually going to get media coverage from one of the combatants.
Wow.
And when you're going up against something as massive as like NATO or the United States, they're going to be the most aggressive media coverage. It's not going to be the Iraqi media coverage, you know what I mean, if any at all. That's the thing. There's an old saying that history is written by the victors, right? History is written by the victors. So whoever wins the war writes the story. Doesn't always necessarily mean it's the historically accurate story. Let's put it that way.
Well, this was the age of televised war. And I remember first with the first Gulf War, you know, when I was living in New York then, and, you know, you'd be at a bar with someone, it'd be like 10 or 11 at night. You want another drink? Nah, I'm going to go home and watch the war. And you'd go home and watch it live and stuff. And that was what you could do. And, of course, you could still do it here in 2003, 2004. And it is interesting how the perspectives change. And you can see a lot of that with a lot of historiography. I mean, on the Great War, we talked a lot about how perceptions have changed of everything about it over the last 100 years. But what about the song itself?
Oh, a bit of a different, a little bit harder song that we do. And I have a very weird memory about it because I remember we had a show in Usha.
I love his Starfleet Academy shirt, by the way. I love that this total, like, you know, military historian type of guy is wearing a total nerd shirt. I love that.
Okay.
Very, very small town.
Yeah.
And it was a very small show. And I don't know how long we played. But we were playing in a basement. This must be around 2003 or 4.
Okay.
And we had the music, but we didn't have the lyrics. But we wanted to play the song.
Yeah.
So we pretty much improvised everything.
So do you remember how any of it happened to go?
I think I have probably, chosen to forget.
I can see how that
memory.
goes. But how long before the lyrics did you have the music then written for this?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe a couple of months.
Okay.
I mean, we've done it before. We did the song Metalizer the first time.
Yeah, sure,
We did that without lyrics. The first time we did the song Nuclear Attack live was also, we only had the choir parts, of course, when we sing harmony vocals.
Right.
We had something and the rest was improvised.
Well, then, can we look forward? I mean, after your next album, the 90s R&B classic album,
Yes.
can we look forward to the smoky lounge jazz instrumental Sabaton album?
I would hope so. It would be amazing.
You know, I
I would love to hear that. I would love to hear that.
learned so much just doing this, you know? And I get the news. I mean, this is going to come out, you know, weeks after we shoot this. I get the news that you're going to do a smoky lounge jazz instrumental album before
We
those
should
people go
ask
home.
these guys what they want, actually.
After this 90s R&B album, because that's definite.
Yeah, obviously. But you guys, seriously, out of all strange music styles,
Yeah?
let's say everything from jazz lounge stuff to R&B to country, whatever it is, or
Or like
hardcore techno,
Gregorian chants?
Gregorian chants. What weird music style would you like to hear a Sabaton song done?
I think I'd like to see you guys do like a klezmer.
That would be amazing.
Oh, man. I really hope Sabaton tries to do weird styles. That would be really awesome. I'd love that.
That'd be really good. If you don't know what klezmer is, just Google it. Look up some klezmer songs.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Because there's two rules when you see a klezmer band. One, the song is never allowed to end. And two, it has to keep getting faster and faster and faster the entire time. I don't know how they do it, but it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Now, there's the thing. When klezmer really became, you know, different music you associate with different generations. You know, when 20s you had jazz really breaking through worldwide and stuff. You got rock and
Big
roll
band.
in the 1950s and stuff. Punk in the late 70s. In the 1880s and early 1890s, you know, klezmer was the thing. You know, there would be the hottest new clubs were like Klezmer Club. That'd be an awesome time to go visit.
It's worth to remember as well. With music and anything else, something that the new hot thing might 100 years later be a classic.
Yeah, sure. Well, anything. I mean, minuets were the hot thing for a while in the 1700s. Any musical style has had its breakthrough, cutting edge, nobody's done this before kind of style.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's really interesting. All right, well, is that it for us today?
That is it for today. We got off topic, but that's fun.
That's okay. Well, we'll see you next time on Sabaton History.
I love this. Oh, that's a good song.
All right, and here's some cool stuff going. We're gonna do our older albums with the History Channel editions. That's got indie speaking. It's cool as I can't say that word. Anyway.
You said it last time.
You should become a patron.
Well, I guess last time was actually further in the. It was like 75, I think. But last time we did one, he said the F word.
Because then you can get that stuff. See you soon.
All right, that was awesome. I really, really enjoyed that. Yeah, so Operation Desert Storm. That was crazy stuff, man, because obviously I was a baby when that happened, but I was introduced to the concept of Saddam Hussein later in my life, because obviously the Iraq war that we went through with George Bush, that was all about Saddam Hussein, so that was a very interesting thing. And but yeah, it was kind of crazy. It's really, like I said, it's a great representation of how formidable and overwhelming the military force of the United States and its allies is. It's pretty intense. It really is. And yeah, guys, I cannot wait to keep doing these videos. I love them. Guys, if you enjoyed this reaction, like, comment, subscribe if you feel so inclined. Follow me on all my social media, join my Discord, follow me on Twitch. Everything I do is down in the description. Come hang out. Until next time, guys, I've been Count Richter Quake, and I hope you